Welcome back to Politics Unplugged. Across the country, low inventory is driving housing prices up. July data shows salaries for many critical jobs aren't high enough to buy a home. And in many cases, even renting a one-bedroom place is out of reach for people like nurses, first responders, and teachers. Michaela Marshall shows us what it means for those industries and their ability to recruit.
Police answer the call to protect our city, but most officers across Phoenix can't afford to buy a home in the same community they serve.
A lot of our officers live outside the city of Phoenix for a variety of reasons, but a lot of it comes down to what their dollar buys them for their homes.
Daryl Kriplin is the president of the Phoenix Law Enforcement Association. He's been with Phoenix Police for nearly 3 decades.
My first home was about $150,000. Of course, I graduated the academy making just under $12 an hour. So,
according to July 2023 data from a local economic firm, the least affordable city is Scottsdale, with the median home price coming in at $795,000. And the most affordable option to buy is Avondale, with the median home price of just over $413,000. In many cases, a police officer's salary isn't enough to buy a home anywhere.
I'm not shocked by it.
Go ahead and then start writing.
The situation is even worse for teachers. Not only can they not afford to buy a home, in some cities across the valley, rent for a one-bedroom apartment is out of budget.
We see teachers living with their parents or grandparents, 3 generations in a home, 3 roommates in a 2-bedroom apartment.
Marisol Garcia is the president of the Arizona Education Association. She says educators not being able to afford to live in the same neighborhoods they teach in takes a toll.
It really does put a strain on our ability to do our jobs the way we want to and the way we've been trained to.
And Jessica Boehm from Axios has reported extensively on housing issues. She joins us now. I want to thank you very much for being here, Jessica. Now, you've also reported on this same study that was done by Elliot Pollack. For those who don't know, he is one of the preeminent economists here in Arizona. He routinely gives reports to state lawmakers every year and stuff like that. What else for you? I mean, obviously the top line is that first responders, teachers, all these people can't afford these homes. What else stood out to you?
I mean, it was really, we've talked about this, it's a really depressing thing to read because it showed, you know, a lot of us have seen how home ownership has fallen out of reach for so many of our essential workers, people we relied on during the pandemic when all of us were staying home. They can't buy a home, but now we're seeing that they can't even rent a home.
That's the thing that's crazy.
Yeah, most, like the typical retail worker or restaurant worker, they are not even able to afford a one-bedroom, the average one-bedroom apartment anywhere in the valley. We're not just talking about downtown Phoenix, we're talking about the entire valley. And, you know, I think a lot of us have liked the changes we've seen come to the valley in the last 10 years. We have great restaurants, great shopping options, but the folks that make that all possible are not able to live in our community.
Yeah, and a little bit of background too, because it wasn't really mentioned in the package, and we should mention here, this was all based on that 30% kind of threshold, that you shouldn't be spending more than 30% of your income on housing. And that's what that was based on. But again, you brought up the retail workers, the service workers out there, and that is a huge component of this economy.
Yes.
And they can't afford on their own to live anywhere in this valley on their own with a single salary.
That's right. Or if they are, they're spending way more than that 30% mark, which gets into a really dangerous territory of you taking on too much credit card debt. You feel like if any unexpected thing comes up, if you have a medical emergency, you're putting yourself in a spot where you could get evicted very quickly.
Yeah, or a massive heat wave per se, where your energy bills go through the roof or something like that. It really are starting to live on the margins. And I am trying to transition because also I have you here. You've also really done a lot of great work reporting on the heat wave. And I want to talk a little bit about what are the latest numbers here from Maricopa County in terms of heat-related illnesses and deaths. What are they saying?
Yeah, we're approaching 200 people who have died of heat-related causes. And there's an extra several hundred that are still under investigation where the medical examiner says there's some evidence here that this could be a heat-related death. So by the end of this summer, we could be looking at well over 200 people who have died of heat. And, you know, heat is the #1 weather-related cause of death in the United States. And it's also pretty predictable here of when it's going to happen. You know, we talk about other things like hurricanes and tornadoes. We know there are seasons, but you never know exactly when they're going to hit. It's pretty clear here when we are going to see these deadly temperatures, pretty much all the way from June through September, sometimes earlier, sometimes later.
Yeah, and also, too, you've also got a lot more people living in the valley, so the numbers everywhere are going to go up. I mean, when you start looking at it that way, it's like this is something you have to prepare for every year. But are we on pace to break that grim record? And I believe we are on pace to break that grim record from that was set last year. I believe 425 people died in Maricopa County from heat-related deaths.
Yeah, it does appear that we are going to break that or come very painfully close. And you know, as you said, this is something we have to prepare for every summer. It doesn't feel like any level of government has found a way to prevent these deaths in a substantial way. Like, you know, it's great that we're opening cooling centers in August. It's great that we're doing some of these things. But we've always known that this was going to be a problem. And while we have some new resources this summer, we certainly very clearly, very deadly, obviously do not have enough to keep people alive.
Well, speaking of those new resources, I mean, the governor did issue an executive order. And you know, some of that included opening up two new cooling stations. Obviously, it's reimbursing cities and towns for any costs incurred during that July stretch, through that brutal July stretch of 31 straight days of highs of over 110 degrees. How is that working right now?
So we've seen, I just got some new data actually from the state showing about more than 600 people have used those two facilities from August 12th when they opened to earlier last week or middle of last week. And you know, obviously for those people, it's a really important resource, but it goes back to the fact that this opened on August 12th. And you just mentioned we had 31 days of 110 plus weather.
And hopefully, cross our fingers. Not a weatherman. I'll leave that up to Royal Norman and C. McLaughlin and stuff like that. But I think we're probably at the tail end of the extreme heat here.
That's the hope.
Typically, you don't see those kinds of temperatures in September. Any sense from you, from policymakers, be it on the city level, on the state level, that they're going to start taking heat more seriously moving forward?
I mean, obviously part of this, the executive order and emergency order that came out from the state said that the governor's office is calling on her administration to start that planning for next summer. So I'm certainly hopeful, and hopefully we can get to a better place next summer.
All right, Jessica Boehm from Axios, thank you so much. Always a pleasure to have you here on the show. And